welcome to 805 Sports Talk, and we are getting ready for Week 6 of the high school football season, and a big game Friday night. Lorenzo, you and I will both be there. Pioneer Valley hosts Lompoc in the Los Padres League opener for both teams. You've seen both of those squads. How do you feel about that matchup? Will Pioneer Valley provide any resistance, or do you think Lompoc will start the LPL play with a big win?
Even if Pioneer Valley does provide any kind of resistance, it's probably not going to last very long. I mean, we've seen this Lompoc team time and time again. Even if there's like any jitters, they find a way out of it. I mean, going back to the Righetti game, they were facing a third and literally 30, and then Ryan Morgan catches this 40-yard bomb, and that pretty much shifts the tide over to Lompoc. So, I mean, Pioneer Valley, to its credit, has gone off to a pretty decent start at 3-2, considering the schedule that they mustered. But, you know, I just feel like this Lompoc team is just a whole different animal.
Yeah, I think the Panthers did okay keeping up with the Tascadero. I think some people were kind of hoping Pioneer Valley would be able to beat the Greyhounds. It was 21-7. It was a little bit closer than that. I think there was a late fumble, kind of a controversial fumble that was returned by a Tascadero for the score to kind of put that one away. But it was a respectable road defeat against a Pac-5 league team.
Well, the thing is that, I mean, I look at the SLO County scene, and it's down this year. I mean, to put it mildly, and I mean, I just haven't been impressed with Atascadero. And to me, Pioneer Valley losing to Atascadero, that to me is a red flag, considering how down that scene is. So that's a red flag going against Lompoc, in my opinion.
Yeah, I could definitely see where you're coming from, but just generally, the Santa Maria Valley teams do struggle against those Paso Robles and Atascadero. So, I mean, I guess they kept it close, so that might be, you know, a feather for the cap of Pioneer Valley. But, you know, it wasn't a blowout. They were right there with them. So I think maybe they find a little solace in that fact. Kelly, or Elliot, how do you feel about that?
Lompoc is going to win every game until maybe the semifinals or the finals of the playoffs. I think their biggest test may be San Ynez, but even San Ynez, they run up a lot of points, but they haven't played Lompoc yet. But you know, I like John Ruiz and his kids over at Pioneer Valley. They work hard, they play hard, but they're playing Lompoc, and they're a different beast, and I just don't see how they could win it. They may be able to score a little bit, but not enough. It's one of those I see where Andrew Jones somewhere in 59 or so points will call off the Dogs, but nobody. They're just a class of the Central Coast. And there's some decent teams. Arroyo Grande is becoming a pretty good team, but nobody is on the level with Lompoc. So.
Yeah, and Lompoc's win over Arroyo Grande continues to look better and better. AG's, I think, won 4 straight after losing their first 2. So Lompoc's, you know, beat probably maybe the second best team in the area already to start the season, even though maybe some people think that game might be closer if the two teams played right now. Mentioning, you know, the scoreboard putting up a lot of points was St. Joseph on Friday. Brock Marquois set a school record with 10 PATs in the 77 win for the Knights over SLO. I don't think many people were surprised, but maybe Lorenzo, you're a little surprised that they did put up 70 points. How do you feel about St. Joseph just rolling over SLO and getting back on track?
Well, I mean, it's a good morale booster heading into LPL play for St. Joseph, and I mean, I was shocked that Brock actually broke that record. I mean, it's good that we keep point after attempts as a record as well, but you know, Dino Maldonado actually looked almost near flawless in that game. He only had 2 incomplete passes, and he completed 12 of those. But I mean, he's just done an excellent job spreading the football around. And you know, heading into this game against Cabrillo, Cabrillo's been very, very leaky on defense. I mean, it's pretty obvious that AJ Pateras hasn't put his official stamp on that side of the ball. His offense has shown signs of life, especially with Jackson Anderson moving into that quarterback position and just really igniting that offense. But, you know, I mean, I just don't like Cabrillo's chances going against that deep receiving core and an experienced quarterback like Dino Maldonado.
Yeah, the Conchs did get their first win of the season against Morro Bay last week. You mentioned Jackson Anderson. 7 total touchdowns accounted for, I think?
Yeah, and you know, I did go back and do some research over the weekend, and the last Conquistador I can think of who had a similar game like that was Jason Robert. He had 7 touchdowns back in 2001 against Bishop Diego, and at the time that was actually a Santa Barbara County record. Now, I don't know if anybody outside of Cabrillo matched that record or broke it, but you know, Jackson Anderson matched his total in that victory against Morro Bay, and it was also the most combined touchdowns a Cabrillo quarterback has had. So, you know, a good thing for AJ Pateras is that Anderson is a junior. He already has his building block for next year.
Right, he wasn't expecting that either, because Sean Wood unexpectedly quit the team. Otherwise, he'd be in there starting, and maybe it's a blessing in disguise, because the offense has shown significant improvement, signs of life, since Anderson took over. He'd played a little bit in each of the first couple of games, but now it's all on him. He's the man, and he's living up to it. But St. Joe can score points, as we've seen. They both scored last week, but St. Joe's played tougher competition so far, which is their annual game plan, and I think this might be closer than people think, but I think St. Joe's going to have the edge.
I think just in terms of experience and in terms of the fact that Maldonado is so familiar with the guys around him, whereas Cabrillo is still trying to get familiarized with Pateras, the edge already easily goes to St. Joseph, in my opinion.
Yeah, that might be a good quarterback battle with what Jackson Anderson did last week, but I think that Cabrillo defense is way too leaky, like you mentioned. 71 points allowed to Templeton, and we have St. Joseph putting up 70 points against Slow. So I think St. Joseph is going to roll with that one. I don't think many people will be surprised to see another 70-point outburst.
And 42 points against Morro Bay, even in the victory.
And in the win, you were on hand for that one. It seemed like that game dragged on for a while, and it's a good thing they got it in with that Rucker fire that kind of broke out on Friday.
It was my version of Valencia and Calabasas. We were watching that game with the hideous Coyote mascot, but that's another story.
Yeah. Moving over to San Ynez, where I was last week. I was pretty excited for that matchup, but talking to Coach Dan Ellington, Santa Maria's head coach, before that game, he kind of updated me on the injury status of a lot of guys, and I think that's pretty much defining Santa Maria's season is the injuries. Jonathan Ruiz was out last week. Rob Ruiz is out as well. Adrian Ayala didn't play. So many key players were out for Santa Maria last week. A win from the Saints over San Ynez last week would have been huge with those injuries. They just weren't able to do it. I think it was closer than you would think. 27-12 at the start of that fourth quarter, then a 22-point outburst from San Ynez to put that one away. I was on hand for that one. San Ynez probably won't be challenged against Morro Bay. I'm sure they won't, but they do got to kind of get ready for LPL play, because I don't think they've played a team that's really up to the caliber that some of these LPL teams are this year, with how strong the LPL has looked. I don't think they've played a team that's as good as Pioneer Valley this year. I think they're going to have their hands full with St. Joseph. So San Ynez taking on some of those LPL teams, they got to make sure they're primed. They had an early season bye, so they have another non-league game Friday night. Then they start LPL play, and it's going to be interesting to see how the Pirates respond to moving into the LPL and the difficulty that challenge that competition brings playing in the LPL.
And let's keep this in mind. In the last 2 years, we've seen San Ynez go 7-3 and 8-2, but they trip up at this point in the league play. And unfortunately, tripping up in league play was really their downfall into how they got snubbed from the playoffs. So now more than ever, we have to really, really scrutinize the Pirates and how they fared this time, especially with the road trip to Lompoc, as you mentioned, Elliot, and also the game against St. Joseph as well. Yeah,
that's going to be their whole season in those two games. Can they get by those guys this year? Playing Morro Bay, San Luis Obispo beat Morro Bay. Everybody's beaten Morro Bay. They're just not a good team, so I'm not worried about the Southern Pirates beating the Northern Pirates, but when those San Ynez Pirates face those two really good teams in their league, that'll be offensive fireworks, but we'll see if they can break through. If they beat one of them, they go to the playoffs. If they can't beat either of them, they could be doomed for another 8-2 year and no playoffs.
I know, we try not to look ahead, but I just have this gut feeling on October the 20th, we're going to find out just who exactly this San Ynez football team really is, and if they can finally scale the Lompoc Mountain.
I don't know if they'll be able to do that, but I don't have a problem with the philosophy or the game plan that Josh McClurg and San Ynez has had for this season, because you look at Friday night's game, San Ynez was pretty much healthy. They were without Ben Schaefer. They haven't really had to grind out a game. You look at Santa Maria playing a lot of bigger schools, Righetti, Pioneer Valley as well. They're super banged up. San Ynez I don't think really has that problem, even though they were without Schaefer. So they're going to be fresh entering LPL play. And I think this is a different team than what we've seen in the past. An example would be Gabe Prendergast. He had a big pick over Jonathan Ramos on a nice jump ball, and he got a sportsmanlike conduct penalty right after that. He was jawing with Ramos. That kind of shows the edge and the attitude that this team has. And I talked to Gabe after the game, and he said he shouldn't have done that. He apologized and said it was never will happen again. But he mentioned, we've missed the playoffs the last 2 years. Yeah, we're pretty freaking angry about that. So I think this is San Ynez team has a big edge this year. I don't know if that'll be enough for them to carry them over St. Joseph. I think that's going to decide the playoff spot for San Ynez. Might be closer against Lompoc this year, but I don't see them hurdling that mountain. But if they can maybe slip past St. Joseph somehow, maybe catch the Knights in an off night, they can do that and maybe get a playoff berth this year. But with the way Dino Maldonado's been playing lately, I think 4 touchdowns last week and just 2 incompletions, so that's going to be tough as well. So I think it's going to be very difficult for San Ynez to get over St. Joseph and Lompoc, but I wouldn't be fully shocked if they do slip past St. Joseph this year. Santa Maria, on the other hand, they got to get right. I think they have their bye Friday night, so it's good timing for a bye. They desperately needed that with Ruiz injured. Isaiah Garcia is not going to be back all year, so they've just gone through everything. And Blake Truitt, the quarterback, has been pretty much counted on to run everything that year, so I'm sure he's welcoming a week off.
And I know we've talked about the LPL, but, I mean, as far as the Northern League is concerned, I still wouldn't rule out Santa Maria. I mean, it just seems like top to bottom, that league's down. I mean, yeah, granted, Templeton has shown signs of improvement, but, Napomo's entering Northern League play at 1-4. Santa Maria's banged up. I mean, it's still, to me, a very winnable league.
Yeah, I think that league is wide open, so I wouldn't be surprised if Santa Maria gets right at this point in the season and does pull off 2 or 3 wins that it's going to take to win that league. So that's a good point as well. That Northern League is wide open, especially with Mission Prep out of it this year. It's just
I think Napomo is their big challenge in that league, but they could make the playoffs out of the Northern League. But health is so key. They've lost so many of their offensive weapons. Isaiah Garcia is not going to be back. He might not even be back to even in baseball season. He's part of that CIF championship baseball team, and he may not be able to play his senior year. But the other guys are banged up. They shouldn't be out long, but can they get this week? Will that be enough to get them back on track? I think health is their biggest question. They've got the talent. They've got the game plan. They know how to stop teams on defense. They know how to score points on offense. But if you're getting back to running backs who have not been in the lineup and you're counting on them, it's going to all fall on Blake Truitt, and he just can't win it all by himself. He needs some help back there.
Yeah, and we usually save the 8-man for last, but it was such an amazing game Friday night with Orchid Academy getting that big win over Kate, 72-68 Friday night. You were on hand for that one. It was a marathon game, a high-scoring game. How would you kind of sum up what you saw Friday night?
Well, it was crazy. It was 140 points in a high school football game. That's like a college basketball score, 72-68. Each team scored 10 touchdowns. Each team only stopped the other guy once, basically. Wow. Orchid Academy had a punt once in the first half. They scored 4 touchdowns and had a punt. In the second half, they had 6 touchdowns. 5 times they actually had offensive series and got a touchdown each time. And one time, they ran a kickoff back 79.5 yards. Donovan Miller had his foot right at the goal line, and it's only an 80-yard field, so that's the length of the field. Kate had 6 possessions in the first half, 6 touchdowns. They had 4 touchdowns in the second half and a fumble. Each team lost a fumble. Each team got a onside kick. They tried every trick in the book, and it came down to Orchid Academy beat Kate 12-8 on extra points. They blocked 2 kicks on extra points, and they stopped the run or the pass every other time. But even Kate scored with a couple minutes to go. Orchid Academy then came right back and took the lead with under 50 seconds to go. And then, as I've said, that might have still been too much time on the clock because Kate came right back down and had time for a Hail Mary pass that Jared Sutton knocked out of the end zone to secure the win as time ran out in that game. So Kate had scored. I mean, Orchid Academy scored first. Kate came right back. Orchid Academy scored. Kate came right back. At one point, Kate scored a couple touchdowns and had like a 12-point lead. Orchid Academy came right back, and they just kept battling back and forth. And there was over 1,000 yards of offense. The other side of that coin is where were the defenses? Now, you know, Randy Stanford over at Valley Christian, they won 43-20 this weekend, and he'd said to me, and it's true, because it's 8-man, once in a while if they want to gain like 1 yard, everybody's packed in tight, but most of the time everybody's spread out pretty wide because there's not that many people there. If you can get the center and a guard, or the center and a tackle, whatever you want to call them, because they're either a center and 2 guard tackles on the line with maybe a tight end, if you can get a hole and up to the 2 linebackers, you're gone. And we saw that all night long. Big runs, 15, 20-yard runs. Nobody could stop anybody, and they just marched back and forth. And it was, you know, just like a basketball game where everybody is score, up and down the field. And I tell you, you've been in games, we've all been in games like the Lompoc Cabrillo game where they got 10,000 people in the stands. I have never heard a group from a school with about 550 to 600 students, their side of the stands were packed, and when they scored the touchdown to go ahead with under a minute to go, the stands erupted. The noise was deafening. They just went crazy. It was like being in Seattle with the Seahawks. And at the end of the game, when Sutton knocked that pass down, they went wild. It was, you know, they beat Kate for the first time. They held off an explosive offense the one time they had to do it, and that's the only time they actually stopped them in the whole game.
I know we don't really do preseason awards, but I feel like Doug May deserves some consideration for Coach of the Year with the job he's been putting together at Orchid Academy, and here's why. The victory against Kate, and then the earlier victory against Mojave, and the fact that the Spartans are just so highly ranked. I mean, he's worked wonders there the moment he got on board over there.
Yeah, and they're 5-1. They've only lost to the #1 ranked team in the 8-man Division I, and they're the #2 ranked team, and there's a very good shot that the two of them, if they stay that way, will be on opposite sides of the playoff brackets, and they could meet again for the championship, and maybe Orchid Academy will get a little bit of revenge and bring home a CIF championship. What's it, Doug May's second season, and he's a seasoned coach. He came from Righetti. He'd been there a long time. He'd been at Cabrillo. So he knows his way around high school football, but 8-man was a new animal to him because you've got these big gaps. You don't have 5 men on the line or 6 men on the line. It's a whole new world to learn how to play offense and to play defense, but he's done it. He's brought a couple guys with him from Righetti. They're having the time of their lives, and the kids have picked up on it, and I've talked to a whole bunch of those kids. Darren Miller, their quarterback, Jared Sutton, and they're just loving it. And it's not so much that they're winning, but that they're playing good football, and they like that they've learned how to play it well, and wins come along with that. So they can't wait for the next game and the next. But their coaches are like usual. Don't look too far down the road. 1 week at a time, 1 game at a time, 1 opponent at a time. And if they keep their heads on straight, and I think they will, they should go deep into the playoffs.
Yeah, Orchid Academy might be the Division I favorites, but I think we talked about AG being the Pac-5 league favorite this year. They won 4 in a row. A little slow start against Napomo on Friday night, but the Eagles did pull away. Lorenzo, do you think AG is the second best team in the area now after that 0-2 start? We were worried about them for a while, but they've kind of silenced all those whispers.
Well, I've done my rankings, and I have Lompoc, Ynez, and I still do, but I would definitely put Arroyo Grande in the top 5 at this point. I mean, I just thought that at being 0-2 and being at a place like Arroyo Grande, I mean, it's a culture shock. You don't really know what to do. It's like one of those blindside hits you just don't expect. But credit to Mike Hartman for rallying his guys, keeping his guys in tune. And, the Pac-5 is a very winnable league along with the Northern League because, I mean, Paso Robles, who I saw on Saturday, I mean, they just look like they're in an identity crisis. Slow, as we said earlier in the show, I mean, Slow's a complete mess. And, I mean, the Atascadero, you never really know what you're going to get out of a Atascadero either. So I would definitely pencil in Arroyo Grande as the mountain to climb.
Definitely, the Eagles are on a roll. Mike Hartman's got those guys playing right. James Gilnett, I think 6 touchdowns in the last 2 games, had 3 and 3 in the past 2 games. He's been on a roll.
You have a rising star on the defensive side of the football at AG, Jed Rance, who is averaging over 6 tackles per game as a sophomore.
Yeah, I think he had a pick 2 weeks ago, and he can break up passes. He was at St. Joseph a couple years ago, or last year, and now he's at AG and definitely making an impact on the defensive side for the Eagles as they're getting right just at the right time of the year.
Well, and remember, they lost that first game to Lompoc. Everybody loses to Lompoc. So, and as good as Arroyo Grande's been, league champions regularly, good playoff runs regularly, they haven't been able to get by Lompoc in years. So there's no shame in that one. The second loss was a little bit harder to understand, but you know, Hartman was a longtime St. Joe coach. He went over to Arroyo Grande as an assistant coach, so he's been with that team for several years now. It's not like A.J. Pateras down at Cabrillo, coming in completely cold, having to learn all the kids, learn the leagues. You know, he came up from Ventura, so yeah, they know about us up here on the Central Coast, but he had a whole huge learning curve. Hartman didn't have that. He had continuity with the kids. He knew the kids that were coming back and the kids coming up from freshman and JV football. So, but after a couple games, he got everything right, and I think they're on a roll right now, and I don't see anybody heading them off. I think they're going to prove to be the class of their league. And then the question is, what happens? Who's number 2, though? You just mentioned it. Well, Slow is not going to beat anybody in that league. Passo's just in such turmoil that you can't predict with those guys. They could beat anybody but lose to everybody. And Atascadero is up and down, which I think creates a perfect opening for Righetti. They're getting their game together at the right time.
The Warriors had their bye last week, and they play Slow Friday night on the road. Lorenzo, do you think the Warriors do have a shot at the postseason this year? Would you pencil them in as one of the teams who's going to grab an automatic bid, or do they still got some work to do?
Comparing this Righetti team to last year, this Righetti team has a stronger chance of not only making it to the postseason, but perhaps even crashing the Pac-5 league party. I mean, I just feel like just looking at the players, looking at like even the coaches as well, guys just seem more dialed in. I mean, I got the notion that last year they kind of packed in their pads and already turned them in while the season was going on, but I just haven't seen any quit out of this Righetti team, even after that Lompoc loss. And even Andrew Jones commended Righetti, saying, you know, out of all the teams we played against at Huck, you guys showed the most effort. And I mean, you got cornerstones like Caleb Thomas, Jalen Davis, Brandon Giddings has come on as well, Damian Robles. I mean, you know, it's a credit to Righetti, and I mean, we talked about it earlier, the Pac-5 is very winnable, and even Ed Herman himself believes it too.
And I think the way their schedule shapes out is really good for them as well. They come off that Lompoc loss, take a week off, and then start league play against San Luis Obispo, which is a really good team to kind of get right against. We see St. Joseph put up 70 points, so they can go into league with some big momentum. So I think Righetti's in a good spot right now, you know, coming off that Lompoc loss, but they've shown really well against some of the teams with their wins, and I think they're going to roll to a win Friday night and have a little bit momentum as that Pac-5 league schedule kind of toughens up a little bit.
I agree. I think so. Poor San Luis Obispo. They used to be a really good program. The last couple of years they've been down, and usually you see a team when they get down, as kids get more experience, they get a little bit better the next year and a little bit better the next year, but it hasn't happened with them. So I think this will be a big win for Righetti. I think it'll be a huge confidence builder. I think you're right. Ed Herman has instilled the confidence in these kids, and now they're feeling it.
That's all we got for this week's show, but we'll be live Friday night from Pioneer Valley High School as the Panthers host the Braves. It's our first chance to see the Lompoc team live in action. Pre-game show is at 6:45 p.m. with kickoff at 7 p.m. Go to SantaMariaTimes.com for that game. Thank you guys for tuning in to 805 Sports Talk.